Thanks for checking into the State of Basketball Podcast, episode 12. I'm Adam Miller, and I'm here with Jaron Wilt each and every week. We're going to be bringing you the news and notes on all 11 Division I basketball schools in the state of Indiana, because in 49 states,
it's just basketball.
So we're here with a special episode. We are here with Paul Oren from the Victory Bell. So Paul covers Valpo basketball, and we're excited to talk Valpo. We're going to kind of introduce him to you, get some background, talk about maybe some historical stuff with Valpo. Everyone probably knows about the shot. He's going to break that down for you, and we'll get his thoughts on the year one of the Roger Powell era, and then at the end we're going to preview the Valpo-Evansville game, which is going to be tomorrow. So we are excited to talk to Paul. So Paul, welcome. We're glad to have you here.
Hey, thank you so much. And I love what you guys do. Obviously, you said it, like in 49 other states, right? But in Indiana, it's life. It's basketball. It's what it is. And so I love what you guys do. I think this is great. I love finding you guys on Twitter and saying, hey, or X or whatever we're calling it now. And saying, hey, I got to get on here. We were hoping to do it after, a Valpo win against Chicago State. And that didn't happen. But you know what? It's year one of the Roger Powell era. And it's been interesting, but I'm happy to be here and thrilled to talk about Valpo.
Yeah, I mean, we're excited to have you because, Valpo being one of the smaller schools that we do cover, there's not a lot of large coverage that they get. So when we found you on Twitter and the interactions we've had from you, it's great because, we haven't been following Valpo for very long. We obviously have heard of the school, but it's one of those things that we just they don't get talked about in Fort Wayne where we're at just because of the larger schools around. And we're excited to really, talk to someone who is so in touch with the program there and just the university in general. So we're both really excited to have you here.
Oh, I appreciate it.
All right. So before we ask Paul some questions here, you can find him on Twitter. Your Twitter is at TVB Oren, and you've got your own website, correct?
Yeah, so thevictorybell.com. It's so I worked for the Northwest Indiana Times for a long time, covering high school sports throughout the great state of Indiana, and then covering VU athletics. And a couple of years ago, I just said, you know what, newspaper industry being what it is, I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to cover my own thing. I wanted to do the kind of stories that maybe you wouldn't see in a newspaper anymore. And so I launched thevictorybell.com. It's $5.99 a month or $59.99 for the whole year. And I just cover Valpo up, down, left, right, in men's basketball, women's basketball, volleyball, soccer. Women's soccer went to the NCAA tournament this year. Baseball, softball, bowling just beat the number one team in the country. So it's fun. Like, I miss covering high school sports to a degree. I miss the electricity of Friday night football. High school basketball is so awesome. But I love being able to tell stories that you just don't normally get to tell. Like, I did a story last year. I reached out to all the different coaches and just said, are you a halftime speech giver like they do in the movies? Like, let's break that down. Let's examine it. Like, do you do the Friday Night Lights speech? Do you do the Any Given Sunday speech? And like, I wrote 2,500 words on that. And like, no newspaper in the world would give me 2,500 words to do a story like that. But that's the kind of stuff I'm doing. Plus the day in, day out coverage of the sports teams. But that's the kind of stuff that I like to do. And that's what I'm doing at thevictorybell.com.
It's awesome. It's like gets to be more of a passion project to get some more autonomy and get to kind of do the stories you want to do instead of, having hit all those deadlines or whatever you've got. But that's awesome. So you're a Valpo alum, correct?
Yeah. So I've been, and we'll go into it. Like, I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin originally, right? I grew up a diehard Marquette fan, still am to a degree. Wisconsin, I love, when Wisconsin and Marquette play each other, that's like Christmas morning for me. I get to watch my two favorite teams play each other. It's different, like in Indiana, when Indiana and Purdue play each other, they're in the same conference. So like, you're either an IU fan or a Purdue fan. And some people in Wisconsin will tell you you're either a Wisconsin fan or a Marquette fan. I like them both. And then when I was looking at colleges, my senior year of high school, Bryce Drew hits this three-pointer called The Shot. And I'm not going to say that in the moment it was like this epiphany, like it changed my life. because in the moment I was skipping school with my friends watching the NCAA tournament.
As you should be.
And we ran around the house. We were cheering. I've gone to Lutheran schools all my life, and Valpo was a Lutheran school. So we all had gotten Valpo material sent to us, like recruiting us and stuff like that, just because we got on some lists because we all played grade school Lutheran basketball. And so I started looking at it, and I'm like, well, ESPN keeps going to Valpo to cover stories. What if I went to Valpo? I could like meet ESPN, and then I could like get a job at ESPN. And so to
Yeah.
me, that was my focus. That was my idea. So I went to Valpo, and I walked into the campus radio station the first day, and I said, I want to cover sports. I walked into the student newspaper a couple days later and said, I want to write about sports. And there we go. And then, I graduated and went and worked at a rock radio station in Milwaukee for a couple of years, but I felt this pull to go back and do sports. And it brought me back to Northwest Indiana. There's something about the state, that is special that growing up in Wisconsin, I didn't really feel. But then as I got there, I fell in love with the pork tenderloin sandwich in Indiana. And that's really what kind of got me,
Yeah, no, we love that, right? Like that's one thing that I think Adam and I both kind of agree on is you don't have to be from Indiana to love, and feel the passion of basketball in the state of Indiana, right? And I think that that's something that is unique. Obviously, we talk about it every episode, right? It's more than just basketball here. And I mean, we'll always accept anyone who wants to transplant themselves and call themselves a fan of, I guess,
I would tell you that.
for
Yeah, I'll tell you this. The first pickup game that I ever played on campus in Valpo, I probably shot 15 to 20 percentage points higher from three. And I just thought there was something in the air with the way the ball flowed through the air in Indiana where the jump shots went in a little bit more. So my 3-point percentage in Wisconsin was not very good. I was Reggie Miller when I got to Indiana.
You could just feel it. It just felt right,
Yeah.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So I guess, we talked about, you went to Valpo. Talk to us about the community there. Like, what's it like? What is the support for the sports teams, both, and how it was when you were in school, right? Going there after a pretty exciting time, and then kind of how it's adapted, maybe gotten ebbed and flowed over the years.
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, when I went to school at Valpo, they're coming off the Sweet 16. They bring in this new class of players, including a star guard from LaPorte High School. And so you're a local kid there. You still got Homer Drew there. You got Scott Drew as the assistant coach. And the fans were coming out in droves, right? My junior year, we got a televised game. We were at 11:30 a.m. on Fox Sports Detroit against Oakland University, who was a big rival. Greg Campy, who's a dear friend of mine to this day, still coaching at Oakland. And I mean, we partied all night because we were going to be on TV. Hey, mom,
Right.
send money, those signs, things like that. And we were loud in the student section. And that was a very interesting game because there was a fight that broke out. Homer was in the hospital. So Scott coached. It was a wild day. That was the only time when I was in school for a home game that Valpo was on TV. Other games like NCAA tournament games, the Mid-Con tournament championship game was always on TV, but that was the only home game that was on TV, and that was special. Now you fast forward 2 decades, every game is available on ESPN Plus, right? It's not a big deal to be on TV anymore. It's not, and that something is lost there for me because I think the community was the community is great at Valpo now, don't get me wrong, but like back then, if you were a student from anywhere in the country and you showed up to go to Valpo, you became a diehard Valpo fan and you went to games. Now, if you're from West Lafayette and you drive up and you're a student at Valpo, you can just sit at home and watch Purdue on TV. And so, and so that's different now because every game's available. We've got some weather lately and people might not want to go out in the weather. They'll just stay home and watch the game. I mean, I don't want to sound like that guy, but I went uphill both ways in snow to get to games when I was a student because that was the only thing to do. So that said, you ask about the community, they're great. They're supportive. They're supportive of me at the Victory Bell, which is great. And, we had a game I say Valpo had a game the other night where they honored a woman named Connie Brecher, who celebrated her 103rd birthday at the Arc for a game. And she's a 1942 Valpo grad. She's been going to games forever. And she was at the game for her 103rd birthday. So take that, Sister Jean. We got
Yeah.
Connie.
That'd be the
That's
matchup of a
awesome.
lifetime. Get Loyola Chicago to come down and have them square off.
That's right.
Yeah, that's definitely different nowadays where you can catch every game. It's nice to see, like here in like where we are in Fort Wayne, it's like high school games are still kind of like community events. Everyone will just like, we just went out and caught a high school game, but like the attendance at like Purdue Fort Wayne is usually not pretty crazy, just because you can just watch it on TV and you don't really need to go.
And
So
people are listening to, the State of Basketball podcast, and they're
yeah,
reading the
exactly.
victorybell.com, and they've got other things to do with their time than go to every game.
Yeah,
Exactly.
so let's kind of rewind a little bit. So you said that the shot is what got you to go to Valpo. So we know, the Drews are, a historic family, very important to Valpo basketball. We know about the shot against Ole Miss in '98, but what else can you tell us about Valpo basketball that, people like us who haven't been following Valpo and the Beacons for super long, don't know and probably need to know?
Yeah, I think there's two big things that we'll point out. One was in the mid 40s. This is really what kind of put Valpo on the map. In the 20s, they had a team called the Victory Five. I haven't done enough research on that to be able to talk about that one. But in the 40s, the Big Ten canceled all their sports because of World War II, right? And they basically said we're gonna cancel our sports. A lot of our student athletes are going off to fight in the war. And so at the time, from what I know, the military had height requirements or maybe height cutoffs. If you were too tall, you couldn't be in the military. If you were 6'10", you couldn't be in the military. Either you couldn't be on the boat going over or whatever that might be. And so there were a lot of guys who couldn't go who were 6'10", were tall. And so Valpo kept playing basketball. Again, a lot of these Big Ten teams weren't around. And so in the, I think 44, 45 was the season, or maybe it was 43, 44, Valpo had a team called the World's Tallest Team. And Don and Wally Warnicki were the stars of this team. And they had some other guys that were on there who would go on to the NBA, that version of the NBA at the time. And they were known as the world's tallest team. And so that was a really big one. And so they had a year, they went 21-3. They went to Madison Square Garden. They played Long Island at Madison Square Garden, and they had kind of a famous photograph of outside Madison Square Garden. When Valpo went to the NIT championship game in 2016, they replicated that photo with the current team. So that's pretty awesome. And then when the war ended, all these guys went back to their schools or they ran out of eligibility. And then the same coach, Lauren Ellis, they ended up in the 46-47 season, had an 11-game losing streak, which is the second longest losing streak in program history. And Valpo, currently is flirting with that right now. Another thing to know, prior to the start of the shot, one of the reasons why Valpo became so good, not only was Bryce Drew, but it was Scott Drew, who's now the coach at Baylor. He was the guy who really said, look, and you got to remember this is before Dirk Nowitzki. He said, we can go to Europe and we can get players because the guys over there know about the NCAA because the internet was just starting. They know about the NCAA, but they don't know the difference between Valpo and Duke. And so he would go to Croatia, he would go to Latvia, he would go to Finland, and he would get these big European guys to come over, guys like Tony Vilshinskis or Zoran Viskovic or Rytis Grafs or Lubos Barton. And he'd get these guys to come over. And that started kind of really, that along with Bryce Drew, really started the push. And then they got some other pieces, the twins, Bill and Bob Jenkins, Jamie Sykes. And that's what got Valpo launched, was really hitting the European pipeline. Now everybody does it, right? St. Mary's has got a setup in Australia. They get guys all the time. Everybody's got these European players. Nobody was doing that in the 90s. Scott Drew is the one who started that. So those are really kind of beyond the shot, a couple of unique Valpo trivia things.
That's really interesting. I did not know that. And I mean,
That's smart.
Well, and
Like,
again, it's everybody does it now, and
yeah,
yeah.
sadly, people know the difference between Valpo and Duke now. And so, but at the
right.
time, you didn't, right? Maybe you had AOL in the library or something like that, and you could get, but that was it. And it was great. It worked out really well for Scott Drew and helped launch his coaching career. He's a great recruiter, and you see what he's done at Baylor.
Yeah, that's just I'm struggling to wrap my head around that, because it's so smart, but it's so ingrained, like you said, that everyone does it now. But like, someone had to come up with the idea, and
Yeah.
that's just awesome.
And he Powell was at Gonzaga when Tommy Lloyd would have been there at the same
Yes.
time. They would have been coaching together. So I mean, Tommy Lloyd's he's still getting those international people. I wonder if Powell
Yeah. I mean, now at
go
this
that
point,
route.
yeah, now at this point, teams are set up and doing great things recruiting wise and all of that. And I think the days of Valpo getting 4 or almost 5-star recruits from Europe are probably not happening anymore. But there was a pretty beautiful time there where Valpo was hitting the recruiting pipeline in ways that nobody else was.
Good for them. Good for them. So I guess taking it back, we talked about all this historical context for a while. For those of you who don't know, for our listeners who don't know, rather, Valpo, they were the Crusaders, right? And then I think in the last 6 or 7 years, it changed to the Beacons. Can you kind of what are your thoughts on that? Kind of talk us through what that was like.
We're touching the third rail right here with that one. Yeah. So Valpo, for the longest time, Valpo used to be known as the Uhlans, which was a German cavalry officer. And then World War II hit, and some people decided maybe Valpo shouldn't be named after the German officer. And so then they went a little while without a name, and they came up with Crusaders, right? And well, I got to school at Valpo in 1999, and even then, people were talking about trying to change the name. And I just kind of said, this is ridiculous. Like, Martin Luther King Jr. was a Crusader. JFK was a Crusader. It all depends on what your definition of the term is. And then as time went on, and every couple of years, a new group of students or a new faculty member would try to push this envelope a little bit. And I just thought, you know what? Like, if Valpo does their job, Valpo's the brand, right? Gonzaga is the brand, or the Zags are the brand. We don't talk about the Bulldogs, right? For Duke, we talk about Duke. Very rarely do we talk about the Blue Devils. So the brand is Valpo, right? The brand shouldn't be the mascot or the nickname, right? And so I kind of relented a little bit and said, I don't really care. And then I sat down with a guy who teaches at Valpo, and he's from the Middle East, and he's a diehard sports fan. Biggest Cleveland Browns fan that one of the biggest Cleveland Browns fans that I know. So he's a tortured fan, right? And he told me, he said, hey, when I go back home, like, I can't bring Valpo gear. Like, I can't bring Crusaders gear back home. And he's like, it is just such an offensive term where he's from. And I said, you know what? Like, to me, it doesn't really matter. I get it. Like, I understand people are like, the go woke, go broke community out there and everything. But Valpo is the brand. That to me is the brand. And so now this is like 2 or 3 years ago, they changed to Beacons, and then they announced the mascots, Beacon and Blaze, which are these dogs that look silly, but I'm 43. Every mascot looks silly to me.
Right.
Like, but I see I see kids and how excited they are, and they love it. So I mean, who are mascots for? You asked my take on it. I don't, I never played for Valpo, so I never sang the fight song. I know a lot of former football players. The first line of the fight song is "Hail Crusaders, we rise to glory," and they're upset that name has been taken away. And some people, some donors, were upset with not being talked about or not being consulted. To me, Valpo's the brand. That's what they should concentrate on. And Beacons or Blaze, or I did a whole thing. I wanted koalas, right? I got over my shoulder here. I got a logo that I made on a T-shirt from my old podcast that had a logo with a fighting koala. That's what I wanted, and I didn't get my way. So there we go. Valpo's the brand. That's my take on it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, doesn't matter if they're, how many teams are Eagles or how many teams are Tigers. It's all about, Valpo. That's a good point. So, obviously your website is, thevictorybell.com, but tell us what the Victory Bell is, both, your website and the Victory Bell at Valparaiso.
Yeah, so there's a bell, and I don't even know the history. I probably should know the history of it, right? Because I created a website about it. But there's a bell that was on campus, and it's the Victory Bell. It's just a giant bell, and it's got this like this little setup around it where it's kind of hanging in the air, and it's what people do when you pass a test. You go ring the Victory Bell. You get that date, you go ring the Victory Bell, right? You win a game, you go ring the Victory Bell. You graduate. It's after graduation. Most of the time, it's like, hey, where are we going to meet after graduation? Like you're talking to your parents, meet me at the Victory Bell, and that's where everybody goes. And so when I launched this site, I used to have a podcast called Union Street Hoops because the arena is on Union Street, but this was going to be more than just hoops. This was going to be everything. So I thought, what represents everything at Valpo? That's the Victory Bell. And so I was going to do victorybell.com. There is an Asian gymnast somewhere named Victory Bell that at least I found. And so I couldn't do that. I think the Victory Bell is the name of the trophy in the UCLA USC football rivalry, I think. So somebody had a Twitter account or something like Victory Bell was for that. And so then I thought Valpo Victory Bell, and I just settled on the Victory Bell. And then I had to buy the domain name the Victory Bell, and somebody else owned it. GoDaddy was trying to sell it to me for $10,000. That was fascinating. I ended up getting it for like $10. Never, you got to negotiate, but yeah. So that's the Victory Bell.
That's one thing that stood out to me. Like when we were starting to research just these teams before the season started, and like you go click on like the roster page for Valparaiso, and their like team photo, is the only one that's like not in a gym. They're all standing right in front of the Victory Bell, and I was like, okay, I don't know what's going on, but like it immediately stood out to me.
Yeah, and to me, I didn't even realize it at the time how good of branding that this is, because anytime something good happens, they go to the Victory Bell. And so the women's soccer team goes to the NCAA tournament, and they got back like 11 o'clock at night from Des Moines, Iowa, and they had a party in front of the Victory Bell. And so I'm there recording the whole thing, and it's like, look at how good this branding is. This is fantastic. So yeah, that's the Victory Bell.
That's awesome. I think it's, and I just as a sidebar, I looked it up. There's like 4, 5, 6, something like that, different college football programs where their rivalry trophy is called Victory Bell or the Victory Bell. Didn't know that, but
yeah, and look, I'm just trying to make it my brand, and maybe maybe UCLA and USC are fighting for dominance of the Valpo Victory Bell. We'll see.
And I mean, TVB, like, I think it's a great abbreviation. It's got nice flow to it. Your Twitter handle, like we talked about, TVB Oren, like it's got it flows well. It sounds good. I think it's a great. No,
I appreciate that.
Jaron studied marketing, if you can't tell.
Good. You let me know how I can advertise, and we'll be fine. So,
but so you talked about it a little bit, the 2016 NIT run. What all do you like? Go a little bit more in depth in that. We'd love to hear kind of any major memories. I think you mentioned recreating the photo outside MSG. Is there anything else that kind of just stands out to you from that?
Absolutely. I'll give you an answer that you're not even really prepared for. Earlier that year, I had this long relationship that ended, and like I was feeling pretty down, like you do when the long thing ends. And I just remember diving into work and using work as a way to kind of pass through the grief of a lost relationship. And Valpo goes on this run. They get, they don't make the NCAA tournament. They were favored. They were the number 1 seed in the Horizon League tournament. They lose on a crazy 99-92 overtime game in Detroit to Green Bay, and they're crushed. And they should make the tournament, right? Like if they were a Power 5 team with the resume they had, they'd be in. But they're a mid-major, and mid-majors get screwed, so they're out. And it's like, okay, now they're going to be in the NIT. They're hosting some games. They beat Texas Southern in the first game. And I'll get to my point in a second. They beat Florida State in the second game. And then they get St. Mary's in the quarterfinals. And the gym is packed. And it's completely sold out. It's a record-setting crowd. And they beat St. Mary's in an amazing game. I mean, this is an Elite 8 level game. And the game ends and they play Frank Sinatra's New York, New York song. And it basically says, like, New York, you can make it anywhere. It's up to you, New York, or whatever. And I just remember thinking, like, you know what? Like, I've been feeling down for the last couple months. I can do anything. I can be anywhere. It's up to you. I'm going to New York to cover this team. Like, it's such an emotional high. And then I'm covering games in Madison Square Garden. And I was just like, you know what? Like, this NIT run has changed my perspective on life. And so I have such fond memories of that run. It was amazing. The championship game, Valpo got blown out in, but it doesn't matter because the season was going to end one way or another in that game. It's just who wins, who loses, whatever. But that run, but it was that particular moment after they beat St. Mary's and it's got the Sinatra song blaring through the speakers. It was like such an out-of-body fun experience. I actually wrote a big article about this on the Victory Bell about a year and a half ago, called "What the NIT Means to Me," and it crushes me that the NIT has basically just been kicked to the curb and the way they're doing things. I know it's going to be an Indy this year, which is kind of awesome, but the NIT was so great. That experience is something I will never forget.
Yeah,
That's
no,
awesome.
That's really awesome that it meant, so much to you personally. I did not expect that
And it's just a
was where you're
basketball
going with
game,
that.
right?
Yeah.
People are like, the NIT, not in tournament or whatever. It was so awesome. And I see teams that pass on the NIT. I see teams that complain about the NIT. And I just think, you know what, for me, I had Bryce Drew hit a shot that changed the direction of my life, and I had Valpo make the NIT that changed another direction of my life. So, I'm all for signs, and it was pretty awesome.
Yeah. I mean, sports just means so much more to, some people. You either get it or you don't.
Yep.
It's
Amen.
just one of those things. But let's talk about the Roger Powell era. So we're in year one. It's going, but we'll get your thoughts on what you think. But so obviously he was at Valpo previously as an assistant, and he's learned under, some great basketball minds like Mark Few and Bryce Drew. But what did you initially think? Obviously, you're plugged in to the Valpo world. What did you think about the hire?
It's interesting because Matt Loddick is close to a friend in this industry as you can have. Like, we don't hang out socially or anything like that, but I mean, I talked to him on the phone earlier today. We keep in touch. So that was hard seeing him let go. But even before he was let go, Gonzaga got sent to Denver for the NCAA tournament. Baylor got sent to Denver for the NCAA tournament, and Grand Canyon got sent. Well, Scott Drew's at Baylor, Bryce Drew's at Grand Canyon, Roger Powell's at Gonzaga. So I tapped into the Victory Bund travel budget, which I don't really have, but I said, you know what, I'm going to go out to Denver and I'm going to go cover these 3 coaches that have got connections to Valpo. And I sat with Roger for they beat Grand Canyon, and the next game was TCU against USC or something like that, and they were going to play, Gonzaga was going to play the winner. And he came and sat next to me on press row while he was doing the scout for the game, and we talked for that entire game about, was he ready to become a head coach yet? What opportunities was he looking for and things like that? At this point, Matt Loddick was still the coach at Valpo, and pretty much we thought was coming back. And then something shifted where they made the decision, the school made the decision to move on from Matt. And it was like a week later, and I get a phone call from Roger, who basically said, "Hey, what are you hearing? I'm putting my name in for the job." And at that point I said, "Okay." I said, "We've got a relationship. I've known him for a long time. I knew him as an assistant." A lot of times you become better friends with the assistants than you do the head coach, just because of just the way that it works. And and we talked on Easter Sunday. He gave me a call, and for 45 minutes, he kind of basically gave me his pitch. And I got off the phone with him, and my girlfriend was in the car with me. We were driving back from Milwaukee, and I looked at her and I said, that's the guy right there, right? Like he wants it. Now I didn't know it was him. It was another guy that had played at Valpo, and it was Greg Tonigal, who has also played at Valpo, the guy from LaPorte, who's at Indiana Wesleyan, and these three guys, Jake Diebler was the other one who's at Ohio State, an assistant. These guys all had connections to Valpo, and that's like asking to choose between your favorite kid, right? Like
Right.
I had connections, relationships with all three of these guys, and so that was hard for me to sit back and because different guys are, what do you think? Who do I should get the job? And I'm like, I'm not doing this, like you just tell me who the coach is, and then we'll go from there. And then, I think it's a great hire. I think Roger's fantastic. He's got a vision for what he wants to do. I think he's built it the right way, and I'm excited to be, I guess, for the lack of a better way, the storyteller or documentarian of what's going on this season. I'm the only media guy who's shown in and day out, and it's been fun. The losses are stacking up, but it's so not about the record this year. It's about the journey, and I'm always, the journey is more important than the destination kind of guy. So what he's building falls in line with the kind of stuff that I like in life. So I'm in. Doesn't mean I'm not going to be critical when they get destroyed by Bradley or take their foot off the gas against Chicago State, but it's been fun to watch so far. And Roger is he wears his heart on his sleeve, and it's fun to watch.
Yeah, it's nice when you like cover a program or you follow a program and they get someone who seems to get it. Like, he was there before. He knows what the people who follow the team like. He knows what everything's, about, and he can come back in and kind of like put his flavor on it. Like, I like those videos he puts out with the grit chain after games, and seems like he's really trying to build something. So that kind of leads us into our next question. I listened to your episode where you had him on, actually, and he talked about, you guys are talking about how obviously now with the transfer portal, you can just go get a bunch of guys and you can win right now. You can build a roster of seniors, 5-year guy, 5th-year guys, but he didn't do that. He brought in a bunch of freshmen. He brought in some young transfers, but it's not working right now. And I don't think that was his goal, but they have 4 wins, I think, right now.
Yeah.
Is this about what you expected?
Yeah. And so I think this is what's interesting. Valpo made the decision to move on from Loddick later than in the off season than most people do. Most people make that decision right around or before the Final Four, right? Or they do it right when their season ends, so they've got their coach in place by the Final Four. Valpo didn't do that. Valpo waited longer. And by waiting longer, the transfer portal was dried up by the time Powell got the job. And so he couldn't go in the portal and get guys. We're going to talk about Valpo-Evansville in a little bit, and their best player this year, and I'm going to butcher his last name. I'm not sure how to say it. Ben Humerichus, I think.
Humrickhouse.
Humrickhouse. Sure, there we go. Yeah. There we go. Humrickhouse. I think he was coming to Valpo if this coaching staff would have got the job a couple weeks earlier. I think he was coming to Valpo. And I say that because I think he had connections with some of these guys that are on this staff. He's doing great at Evansville, and I love the coaches at Evansville. So I'm not saying anything about those guys. I'm just saying that there were guys that I think Roger's staff had in mind that had to make decisions before all the scholarships went away at other places. And so really, through no fault of his own, Roger had to go young. And I actually think that's a benefit, because if you hop on the transfer portal express and you win, you just got to do it over and over and over again. And that can get exhausting, right? And so they've got Cooper Schwieger, a freshman, really good. They've got Isaiah Stafford, a JUCO guy who's in, who will have another year next year, really good. They've got Kaspar Sepp, really good. Jahari Williamson, really good. Jackson Edwards, really good. Like young guys that either, came in from other schools or are true freshmen. And look, it's college basketball in 2024. Some of these guys are going to leave because some of these guys are going to leave because that's college
Yeah.
basketball. But some of
Yeah.
these guys are going to stay. And the guys that stay are going to grow together. And Powell has said in a couple interviews lately, he's got dudes ready to go. And I don't know if that means that he's got specific guys in mind or if he's just they're going to re-outfit their team through the transfer portal with some young guys. And to me, I like what they're doing now. I like the promise of a future. Valpo had a couple fifth-year grad transfers the last couple of years. And by the time you get to know these guys, they're gone. Like, as a fan base, how can you cheer for these guys when they're only there for 8 months, And so I've appreciated getting to know these young kids with the idea that hopefully it'll be relationships that will grow over time.
Yeah, and that's great. I think we even talked about it last week. Is we've been acknowledging this young team that they have, right? And that there's so much promise for the years to come, especially when you're taking the approach like Roger did, where he didn't load up in the transfer portal. One question I do have, though, so funnily enough, Adam and I went to the high school basketball state finals last year. We specifically we wanted to watch the finals, but we paid a lot of attention to Flory Badunga, who was a 5-star recruit for Kansas, and Zane Dowdy, guy from, I can't even remember, Center Grove.
No, it was
who was it? Ben Davis.
Ben Davis. Yeah.
We watched him just absolutely play out of his mind against Flory. We looked him up. We're like, okay, this kid's going to Valpo. He's going to be a star. Well, then I think 4 days later is when they announced that they were firing Lodick, and so he decommitted and obviously went to Ball State. But we're just curious, what does recruiting look like in general? I don't know that either of us have seen any 2024 commits.
There's one,
Okay.
and it's a good story. So first of all, on Zane, man, did I love getting to know Zane. I met with him on one of his visits that he took. I interviewed him. What a great story that kid is. He's got a ton of siblings. I really, really would have loved getting to cover him for his college basketball career. And I was bummed out that he decommitted. They had a couple guys that decommitted. They had three signees. They had Jahari Williamson, and he's here. And then they had Giannis Bamba, who ended up going to Wichita State with one of the Valpo assistants who left, who was at Wichita State for like a month and then got a job at Princeton. But Bamba's
What a
still
name
there.
he has, Giannis
Bamba.
Bamba.
Yanis, Giannis Bamba. He's from Canada. He's an athletic maven. And then Zane. I get it. Valpo gets rid of the guys that recruit, and it was Luke Gore, who's now at Princeton, who did a lot of the recruiting on Zane Doty. And, Zane had to protect himself, and so he went in the portal. And he went in the he decommitted, but he decommitted on the strength of that performance in the state finals, right? And of course, Ball State was smart to go get him. So, I think if Roger would have gotten hired and, a little bit quicker, I think there's probably every bit of possibility that Zane could have fit in just fine there. Mm-hmm. But again, these things move fast. And Zane Doty, again, great player, great guy. Wish him all the luck. Valpo's got one verbal so far for next year, and it's a great story. It's Justice McNair. Justice is the point guard at Joliet West High School, the same high school that Roger Powell went to. Justice was his mother is dear friends with Roger, and they just have a very, very, very close connection. Joliet is a special place for the basketball fraternity in Illinois, and his first phone call, really, after getting the job was to Justice McNair. McNair is going to blow up this year. He went to the same high school as is it Fears, the kid at
Jeremy Fears, Michigan State,
who just got shot. That's one of his good friends, and McNair has never really had the ball in his hands in high school. Now he does this year, and he's exploding. He's a kid that Valpo probably wouldn't normally get
Right. They
because
didn't
you
have that
go higher.
connection.
But that connection with Roger Powell, so he's coming in, and then they'll have a handful of other scholarships. And I honestly, I think they're going to go older with this next group of recruits. So we're not going to hear about any of them yet until the transfer portal truly opens up, and then I expect that Valpo will fill out the rest of its roster using kind of older guys. That's the plan, from what I understand.
Yeah, with the with the portal and decommits, it's just like whenever I always expect a lot of people to decommit whenever a coach is let go because maybe they recommit or whatever, maybe the new staff gets them back, but it's just smart for the kid just to see what else is out there, especially like Zane. Like after that performance, we were like, oh, he's only going to Valpo. Like
Yeah, that
that
was the first
seems
time we
kind
had
of
seen him
wild. We were
play.
like, he just absolutely dominated,
Well, and I
and
think the idea with Zane originally, when he first committed, was he was really raw, and they were like, "We'll take him and we'll redshirt him for a year,
yeah,
and then we'll develop him." And then as he developed so much his senior year of high school, I think suddenly it was,
Yeah.
wait a minute, we're not going to redshirt this guy. We're going to bring this
hmm
guy in, and he'll play right away. And then again, things went the way they did, and he's at Ball State. He's at Ball State with Mason Jones as a freshman as well from Valpo High
yep,
School. That's another guy that I know the previous coaching staff looked at, and he was signed to Ball State by the time Roger and his staff got involved at Valpo. So it's but look, I'm pulling for Ball State simply because of those two guys. I've known Mason and his family for a long time, and then Zane I got to know real well just from the little bit of stories that I wrote about him.
um, one guy that I don't know if they would have gotten if Zane had come to Valpo, but Cooper, like you mentioned, Cooper Schwieger, he's been really great this year. You were talking with Powell about and he was saying he could be like a Valpo great, like he could just come in and play 4 years, be great. You got to keep the guy there, but if he's saying that he could be a Valpo great, it feels kind of confident that he likes to be around. He likes the program. Stafford, we've been following. He was at USI when they weren't even Division One at the time. They were Division Two. So when he was there, so it's nice to see him transfer up. So just those kind of the guys this year, or
Yeah,
who's kind of the
Stafford.
leading scorers?
Stafford, such a fun story, right? He's at Southern Indiana, then he goes to John A. Logan, is on an undefeated national championship team, is and just got slept on by everybody. I don't know how this guy got, he's a high volume scorer, he's a high volume shooter as well,
Mm-hmm.
but he's got a relationship. He's known Valpo's special assistant to the head coach, Quentin Garrison, for a long time, and Q got the job at Valpo, and Isaiah came shortly thereafter, and that's excellent. I mean, Isaiah is a kid who he is very prideful in the way that he plays. He's very good. He goes to Illinois, he scores 30, and he just suffered a knee injury not too long ago, but he's worked his way back. He's fighting to get back. He's putting up big numbers every game. He's a player. And then Cooper's got such a fun family. He's got a twin brother, is redshirting at Wright State. He's got an older brother, and his dad, and then his stepmom. It was actually played soccer at Valpo, which I didn't even know this until after he committed. She played soccer at Valpo in the '90s. I think his dad is fantastic. Cooper commits. I write a story about him. I put on Twitter that I'm going to Kansas City on a trip, and he fires back a bunch of barbecue recommendations, and I hadn't even met the guy yet, and he's giving me all these different recommendations and stuff, and I've now since met Cooper's father a bunch, and they come to every game, they love it, and Cooper is a guy that when he gets the muscle on,
Mm-hmm.
and freshman becomes sophomore, watch out because that kid's going to be something else. And yeah, he can be an all conference player at Valpo and be down in history. He's got the work ethic, he's got the drive, and he's got the talent to be one of the best to ever play at Valpo. What's going to happen now when other teams realize this and start calling with NIL and stuff like that?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? But I love Cooper. I love his approach to the game. His family's great. He's a Valpo guy, and I've really enjoyed getting to know him. Isaiah too. I love watching Isaiah play. I love watching him shoot. He's fantastic.
Yeah, Schwieger's interesting to me because he can stretch the floor a little bit. He can play all around, but you just look at him, he's just so skinny. he's just so, he looks like a freshman, like you would expect. But like looking at how he's played recently, he looks like he's hitting that freshman season's, starting to wear on him a little bit, because earlier in the year he was kind of popping off for some, really good games. But I like how he plays a lot.
Yeah, he's he hit a freshman wall. He's hit a couple freshman walls, and he'll push through it. And the other night against Southern Illinois, he had 9.7 rebounds. He's fighting hard out there. But the thing is that especially in a normal year, freshmen, it's hard for them to contribute. In a year where freshmen are going up against 23, 24-year-olds,
Yeah.
like fifth, sixth year transfers, like it's hard. And this is only going to add, what do they say? Iron sharpens iron. It's only going to add to their resolve.
Yeah, I think that's, we touched on a little bit, is just the future for this program is definitely trending positively, both with the young group that they have, but also just the experience they're getting as a whole. Like you just said, playing against the older opponents. And there's been several tough losses, right? Chicago State, Central Michigan, Elon. I think even Illinois, Chicago.
Yeah, that was a rough one.
Was a 6-point game. Is this, where do you expect this team to go from here? Right, the rest of the season, they're 4-12, right? A lot of people had them projected 7 wins on the season as a whole, and 3 conference wins. But I mean, the experience they're getting, right? Like, you gotta think it's gonna be more positively than that.
Yeah, look, I'll say this: Ken Palm has them projected to lose every game for the rest of the year. From a reporting standpoint, yes, it would be nice to cover a win. It would be nice to walk into a winning press conference. It would be nice to talk to the guys when they're excited. From a storytelling perspective, it doesn't matter to me, right? Like they've been the other night, and they played Southern Illinois, terrible in the first half, and they fight back in the second half, and they made it a game. And you just look for growth when you're telling stories, right?
Right.
So where do I expect the team to finish? The Valley's really hard. It's a really tough league.
It's like a 5-way tie right now or something.
Yeah,
first,
and it's just it's a grind. It's a grind of a league, and you've got a very young roster and a first-year coach. They're all figuring this out together. Yes, you'd like to think they're going to win a game or two here. I think probably, at Evansville, Valpo's had some success there before. It'll be a hard game because Evansville's in year 2. This is what Evansville was last year. Now they got a year head start.
Exactly, yeah.
And then they'll host UIC at home, a team that they just had a hard-fought loss on the road. Well, that team's in year 3 or year 4 of their rebuild. And so it's just it's where teams are. That Southern Illinois, they're in year 3 of their rebuild. And so it's they're playing behind the 8 ball a lot. I think Valpo, once they get one, I think, the top's coming off and they're going to get a few.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they will be a hard out for somebody in the Arch Madness. Now, they will not win the tournament this year. They might not even win a game in the tournament this year. But whoever is playing is going to have to play for 40 minutes because this team is growing quicker than other teams because of the youth. And so we'll see if it pans out to a victory at some point.
Yeah, obviously we always root for our Indiana teams, but Valpo's the team that, they're struggling this year. They're looking forward to next year, but if they can pull off like, a win against Drake or something, that's going to be like, oh, okay, now Drake has really got to fight for, they've got to go steal someone somewhere, a game somewhere else. So it's almost like it's not, I don't want to like equate it to this, but like when the Pistons were losing all those games, it's like, you don't want to be the team that loses to the Pistons. So a lot of the teams are probably gonna be like, we don't want to be we don't want to lose to Valpo. Like we got to handle this win. It's almost more pressure on the other teams, which I think benefits Valparaiso to go out there and just play their game. And, if they're shooting well, just take the game away. But let's talk about this Valpo-Evansville game. So it's gonna be tomorrow night. And Evansville leads the all-time series 25-11. So they've played 36 times. And here's a question for you. So we do free throws on our show. Is just what we call our trivia. Can you guess the team that they've played the most, which is 86 times. What team do you think Valparaiso has played the most out of any team?
Well, I don't want to be that guy, but I do have to correct you.
Oh no.
Sports Reference has led you astray here.
Oh no.
There is in fact a 25 in the number. Valpo has 25 wins over Evansville.
Oh, did I get it wrong?
Has 72 wins over Valpo.
Okay.
So I don't know where, and
I don't know.
So
maybe it only counts like Division I.
I think so. I think
be.
that's what it is. That's a good catch right there, because Valpo went Division I in 81, I think. And so they would have they probably played 36 times in a Division I capacity, but they used to play way before any of us were born. Yeah. And so to that end, Valpo has played Evansville. I saw that note and I thought, okay, so Valpo's played them. This will be the 98th meeting, I think. Okay. All time. Now, as to your other question.
So then let's add this. So that in the Division I era, they've played this team 86 times, which is the most, I guess, in this division. They've played this Division I team.
Are we going to talk about the team in Indy?
No.
It's not Butler.
No.
Okay.
Not according to Sports Reference, where I pulled this data from. Which, now you're making me doubt it.
Okay. Well, Indiana State, they've played a ton.
Yep, it is Indiana State.
Okay, yeah, they played Indiana State a bunch. The number that I have is 94 all-time meetings against Indiana State. But because this podcast is what it is, I'm going to take a moment to talk about Butler. I'm going to interject here. Butler has not beat Valpo in 13 years. Now, they haven't played Valpo in like 13 years either.
Yeah.
So Butler would beat the floor with Valpo for a long time. And then Valpo won 4 straight, including 3 in 1 year, knocked them out of the Horizon League, sent Brad Stevens off to the NBA, and Butler won't play Valpo. They're scared.
Huh.
I mean, that's one take anyway, that they're scared.
Right.
People are saying.
So what's a great gag or bit with the Valpo fans is every once in a while someone will ask me, how many days has it been since Butler's beat Valpo? And we're like in the thousands at this point. And so again, when I saw that there was a question of who's Valpo played the most, well, I can say who hasn't beat Valpo in 13 years, and that's Butler. So,
that's awesome.
That'll get me a bunch of fan mail at the Victory Bell right there.
That's why you don't see any tournaments going on between all the teams in the state, because they're scared.
Obviously, if there was ever a year that Butler would have a shot at Valpo, it would be the year that Valpo's lost 10 in a row. But again, look, and actually Butler's great. I love the coaching staff down there, and they're good people. It's a fun big brother, little brother, half brother rivalry.
You might like them a little bit less after they knocked off your Marquette team.
Yeah, and the point guard for Marquette tore his ACL in the game.
Yeah, I saw that.
Fun.
Oh my gosh,
not fun.
That's and Tyler Kolek is in the worst stretch of shooting I think he's probably ever had.
But to your point, this Valpo-Evansville game is going to be fun. David Ragland, head coach at Evansville, former assistant at Valpo, so he's got a connection there. One of their other guys, Peter Funk, is in his first year at Evansville. He went to Valpo as an undergrad and was a Dobo at Valpo. So there's some connection there, and it's just this is what I love about the Valley. Valpo and Evansville should play each other. Valpo and Ball State should play each other. Valpo and Butler should play each other. Valpo and IUPUI should play each other. And so I love the fact that Valpo and Evansville play each other 2 times a year now.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. And I mean, you mentioned it, right? So Evansville as a whole, currently Valpo going in there. They are 11-point underdogs. Evansville, there's a chance they're playing without Ben Hummerkaus, who we talked about earlier.
Probably, yeah.
He's been in a walking booth the last few games. You mentioned Isaiah Stafford's kind of on the mend. Do you think he'll be ready to go? I mean, I think
he started. So he came off the bench at UIC, and he was noticeably in pain throughout the game, but he fought through it. And then he started against Southern Illinois, and he played all the way through. And so I think he's responding well. And I think what we got to remember at the end of the day is these are 22-year-old kids, and their bodies are made of jello, and they're fine.
Yeah.
You know, if
Yeah.
I sprained my knee at 43, I'd be
Yeah.
out for the rest of the season, right? So
Right.
these guys are they bounce back a little bit faster than we do. So I think Stafford will be ready to go.
Yeah. If I think Hummerkaus is probably still going to be out. It seems like he's just they don't really know how long he's going to be gone, but kind of people that they probably need to watch out for Evansville is lately Chuck Bailey the third. He's a freshman. He's been playing really well coming off the bench. I was just seeing people on Twitter today talk about like he's got to be starting. Like, they've been having slow starts. They've just been getting pounded in the beginning of games, but he's been playing really well. Tanner Cuff has been playing really well, and then you have Toomey. Yeah, I've seen Toomey who's shooting about like 60% right now. So those guys, along with Kenny Strawbridge, I think are going to be the key if Evansville wants to come away with this win. Who do you think is going to be, Stafford probably? Who do you think is going to be the key for Valpo?
Yeah, Darius Diaveros played really well as a junior point guard, but I think to me, the games where Valpo is in it, you see guys like Jackson Edwards or Ola Ajiboya like really play well at the
Mhm.
4 spot. Cooper Schwieger as well at the 4, like 3 or 4 of those guys. The game against Elon, I'll go back to. Cooper Schwieger had 23 points, I think, or 21 points, and Jahari Williamson at 24, I think was the final total there. 2 freshmen with 20
Yep.
plus for the first time in program history. The 2 freshmen at 20 plus in a game, as far as we know, going back years and years and years. If one of those guys can get it going too, I think. And I'll point to Jahari. The guy is, he's 18-year-old kid. He's fun. He loves going on the road and playing in new gyms. I watched him at Illinois. He kind of walked into the State Farm Center, or whatever, the Assembly Hall, whatever they call it now, and they just kind of looked up in the lights and had this big smile on his face. And I asked him about it, and he said, "Man, I'm a kid. I just love playing basketball in these arenas. And the Ford Center is an amazing arena, right? It's a very impressive spot. And I think Jahari will come out and have a really good game in that game. And he had some tough love against Southern Illinois, made some mistakes, only played 7 minutes. I expect him to bounce back and play really well. And again, Evansville's got some good players in their team, and I think the world of Coach Ragland. And I know we were going to talk about this. Like he's going to have. Last year he took over the job, and this year he's got his guys in place. And you saw how hot they were to start the year, and now he's in the Valley, and it's a grind. It is going to be a grind day in and day out in the Valley. And but I like Ragland, and I really like what Evansville's got this year.
Yeah, since 2 Indiana teams, it's hard for us to, I don't know, who do you pick?
You're not allowed to choose, right?
Right.
You're like Kirk Herbstreit doing on College Game Day. You're not allowed to pick the winner, right?
So we're just like, I don't know, close game, good game. That's what
think
we're
it will
hoping
be.
for.
I think it will. I just the Valpo's played well there, although you kind of have to throw that out because it's a whole new Valpo team. But it's going to be a fun atmosphere, right? And the midweek game, students will be back for Evansville, I think. So I expect there'll be a big crowd, and they're getting thousands of people at these games. Ragland has got a great fan base at Evansville. He's got a really good program to build off of. He's got good talent, and I like Toomey a lot. I think he in Strawbridge, all conference guy last year. I think it's going to be a tough game for Valpo. I think they can win, and I think it'll be a good battle.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned getting the fan support they're getting. I think it was last week or the week before, maybe they had their 5th most attended game ever in the Ford Center.
Yep, last week,
which is incredible. I think that's just going to be cool. Like you said, the Valpo players going in there, right? It's going to be an incredible experience, like you said. What I want to do is just we've talked about this game, right? It's exciting. Adam and I are we're with you, and we want to watch a great game. Like we want the game to be wire to wire. Maybe some free basketball just because we love that. But what I want to talk about as we're kind of like wrapping things up is, we're 7 games into not 7 games. 4
We're at the
games
quarter
into,
mark of the Valley slate. 5 or 6 games into the Valley slate right now.
Yeah. So, kind of, what are the other games coming up this season that you kind of have circled as these are either must-watch games? Especially, we talked about at the beginning. We're not the most in tune with Valpo until this year, right? We're learning, but even some of our listeners who are kind of like we were in the last few years is not really sure what games should they watch for Valpo.
Yeah, well, I think Valpo. Valpo's going to end the regular season with Illinois State, and that's kind of become a little bit of a rivalry in a way. Valpo's had some interesting games at Illinois State over the years, some fun comebacks, and so that's always a fun one too. And it really, again, to me, it's the games against the Indiana schools, right? Evansville and Indiana State are the ones that stand out to me. So there's a stretch in early February where Valpo will host Evansville on February 3rd, and then they'll go to Indiana State on February 7th. And I mean, it's just fun to think about. And it goes back to when I was in school. Valpo was in the Mid-Continent Conference, and they were kind of viewed as the stepchildren, right, of the state of Indiana. And the idea that like Evansville and Indiana State rarely would match up with those teams. Indiana State did a little bit here and there. Couldn't get any of the MAC schools to play Valpo. No one wanted to take Valpo seriously. Now that they're in the Valley, the fact that 4 times a year they play Indiana State and Evansville, those are the games that matter. Valpo doesn't have a rival yet in the Valley, and you got to win games in order to make a rivalry. So
Right.
they've broken Illinois State's hearts a little bit. Like UIC is geographically close, but like that's a school in the city, and Valpo's a school in the country to a degree, and so it's like what rivalry can be there? Well, how about going to Indiana State and beating them in a year when they're really good? That would maybe start something a little bit. So outside of Valpo, I do think Indiana State, like them and Drake just played the other night. Drake won the game. They'll play again. That'll be the game of the year. That'll be if we're treated to the Arch Madness that I think we should be, we'll get Bradley, we'll get Belmont, we'll get Drake and Indiana State in the semifinals, and then who knows what we're going to see in the championship. And that's to say the quarterfinals could be great games as well, right? Northern Iowa, I picked to win the league. Southern Illinois is really good. It's just a fun league this year.
We're hoping.
Yeah, that's something we've talked about every episode. It's just how deep the Valley is, and how it's going to be a dogfight to get those top few seeds going into the tournament.
Yeah, we're hoping 2-bid MVC. That's our hope.
So I think one of those like how people get like tattoos on their body like months before the Super Bowl predicting which team will win. I hope there's a Valley fan out there who's getting 2-bid MVC 2024 tattooed on their body somewhere.
That'd be incredible.
That's bold. That's bold. Well, this was a ton of fun. Do you have anything else? Any final remarks you can for our listeners? You can plug yourself, plug your socials again.
No. I mean, look, thevictorybell.com, TVB Oren on Twitter. I have some fun there. I don't take things too seriously, but I will say this seriously. You guys have been great. I love what you guys are doing. It's awesome. Keep it up. And I'm glad to be the first guest. That's awesome. And I'm looking forward to watching you guys grow.
Thank you. We loved having you. I mean, it's great to, kind of build a community, and people have been so nice to us and welcoming to us as we're kind of trying to break into the business, I guess, and, not be so specialized, kind of be those people who can be friends with everybody and tweet nice things about Valparaiso and then tweet nice things about Purdue and Indiana the next day and put people's brain in a pretzel a little bit. But we're just here for those people who love basketball in the state.
Hey, that's right. Because, as they say, and you'll say it, in 49 states. That's right.
Just basketball.
Yep.
Hey, thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, no, we're excited to have you. But, the clock is showing quadruple zeros, so it's time for us to get out of here. Thanks for checking into the State of Basketball podcast. We'll see you next week. Actually, we'll see you this week. We'll see you in a couple of days because this will be a midweek episode. But remember, in 49 states,
it's just basketball.